Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Noobs to Pros. I'm AJ, and today we'll be looking at a couple of games I had in my Leopard 1, the German Tier 10 medium tank. It is one of the two medium tanks you can get at Tier 10, the other one being the E50M for the Germans. So what makes this tank unique, or why should you want to get this tank over the E50M? Well, the Leopard 1 gets incredible camouflage, very accurate gun, and its mobility is only matched by scouts in the game, and its top speed is very comparable to the Bad Chad being slightly faster when it comes to accelerating up to its top speed. Now, over here, in these next two games that I have lined up for you, I want to sort of like show you, or have a really good example of what the Leo 1 can actually do. Now, first of all, we start off on this map. I wanted to push our flank really hard. The reason for that was, if you look at the team composition, we had two tier 10 mediums on our flank. We had a tier 9 TD also on our flank. And we also, I totally forgot about the Bad Chap, but the Bad Chap was with us as well. So we had in all 3 tier 10s and a tier 9 sitting on our flank. Now, the Bad Chat dives in head first into the dip, and I don't want to see him get killed, so I dive in behind him, sort of like to save him from the Object 140 while he was reloading. Over here, you see me pushing this flank up really hard. I don't want to get into a long range engagement with the IS-3. That only will slow me down. So over here, I come all the way up to this ridge. I wait for my team to catch up with me. I attempt to go over the top to see if I can light something, but nothing gets actually lit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna just go over the top and just get to the other side of the ridge. And the reason is that the Leopard has minus 9 degrees of gun depression, and I can use that minus 9 degrees of gun depression going back and forth over the ridge and putting shots after shot into the tanks below. And they have to choose whether to shoot at me or shoot at the tanks that are in front of him. So I'm essentially dividing their attention. So over here, I reduce the IS-3 to 1 shot of health. And as I begin to line up my shot to kill him, the T-54 tries to jump in front to save him, but I just pick off the T-54 instead. Now I just ignore the M103 on my right flank, just because I thought, he would get picked off relatively quickly considering the amount of tank he has to face. I go over the top and see if there's anybody waiting for us in that corner. I only spot an Artie, and I pick him off before he can get back into cover. Now this is a 9.1 replay, so if you're not seeing the sniper view for this tank, that's because it's actually not working well, and so I just chose to sort of like get all the footage in third person instead. Now instead of going through their cap, instead you opt to use this ridge, and this poor T110E4 in the enemy cap gets instantly blown up by the RD and the Waffle Panzer IV. Now again, using these ridges, I will sort of like close the gap to the hill that's in front of me. That's where generally you'll see like TDs and some tanks camping. I see the RHM fire. This shot goes over my head, and I take my time and take him out. Now I see the AMX-50B is running interference against the tanks that are coming out of the cities, so I choose to ignore that flank completely until the M48 is picked off, who's still sitting in their cap. Now, as long as I keep on firing on the M48, he cannot effectively engage the targets that are coming off the flank into the enemy's cap. My first shot bounces, second one connects. The T110E5 does take a shot at me, but it sails harmlessly over my tank. The AMX-50B engages the T110E5, and at this moment I decide that there's enough forces for us to sort of like collapse on the city and effectively turn that engagement, against the enemy team and in our favor. I pick up the T110E5. Now instead of opting to go against the T110E4, who might already be aiming in towards the tank that are coming through this through their cap, I instead go all the way deep to pick off the E100 that's been sitting in the corner of the map, because I thought that he would be the one who would not be expecting a tank to be on his flank. So I go and put one shot into him. He sort of like backs off, you know, and I hurry my second shot because I was almost sure that he must be reloaded by now. So I don't want to get turfed in the face for the rest of my health, and I actually just wait until, you know, his attention is more or less divided, and I pick him off. Unfortunately for me, the T124 gets the last kill, and I don't get the top gun. On the Red Shire map, this is going to be a rather long game, and that's because like this map, even though it still plays out rather quickly, can turn into a slugfest depending on how many tanks there are on enemy team or your team, depending on their composition. If there's enough tank destroyers, then nobody wants to move up towards the enemy's team's cap. Now over here from the south side where we spawn, I like to go to this bush rather early, because then you can spot all the enemy heavies that are going off to the 09 line. And that's initially what I'll be doing until this spot becomes useless, and then I'll opt to play more as the tier 10 medium, support tier 10 medium I'm intended to play. Now over here I spot a couple of tanks on my right, but because I put a little bit of bush between me and them, they don't essentially spot me. And so long as I stay still, I don't think I'll be spotted relatively easily. Now I keep pinging different tanks for our team to focus fire, and so sort of like to, you know, sort of like make them pay attention to some of the tanks that are actually spotted. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stay here for maybe you know, half a sec, you know, 30 seconds more, and then I sort of like decide that enough of their tanks have made it along the 09 line where this sort of like position becomes effectively useless, and I need to get out of here and put my gun into play. Now looking at the composition of the team and the tanks that were proceeding onto the 09 flank, you know, I was sort of like, I was thinking in the back of my mind that that flank might actually fall, but you know, that was a little bit premature as far as I'm concerned. The other thing to factor in also is that some of our heavies were camping in the back while some of them actually pushed into the enemy team, giving the enemy team easier chance to pick off one tank at a time. That is something you should completely avoid. If heavies go one at a time, you run the risk of getting picked off one after the other, and essentially getting whittled down and enemy having an easier chance overcoming most of your tanks. Now I come over here, spot the T30. I don't really have a good shot on the T30, so I try to aim for the commander's hatch, but it unfortunately bounces. I'm still trying to figure out where to go on this map. I do see the Conqueror on one line. In hindsight, I should have pushed up with him, but I choose not to. Over here, I'll come over the top, you know, trying to assist this one of our tanks with dispersing. I put one shot into him, but then I realized that the waffle is staring in our direction, and I'm having none of that, and so I push back. So one thing you have to remember with the Leopard and also the Bat Chat is that Leopard and Bat Chat essentially get no armor whatsoever. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is that in those tanks you should not trade your health unless it's absolutely necessary. And in that instance, I didn't think it was absolutely necessary to trade my health for a Pershing, because that would have left me at very low health, which I could have used towards late game. So in Bat Chat, the other thing you should avoid. Leo and Bat Chat are essentially late game tanks. That means in early to mid game, you support your team to the best of your abilities, but try to be safe. At the same time, you don't want to be out of the battle for most of the game, because if you don't get your gun into the game, what's essentially going to happen is your team is going to always be playing from a tank down, so you're going to put your team at a disadvantage. So it's up to you to sort of like find the spot where you can essentially you know, put your gun into use, but at the same time stay safe enough where you don't trade your health until late game. Now over here, I'm trying to come back to this ridge in order to support my team, I see there's an easy shot to be had on the T-30, and I'll go take that, and reduce him to pretty low health. In a minute or two I'll fast forward, because sort of like during the middle of this game there wasn't really much going on, so there's nothing more that you have missed. I essentially just put one shot in the M103 in the space of a minute or so, because their enemy team just did not want to push into us, and we did not want to push into the enemy heavies, since we were not as beefy as their tanks were. Now over here, what I'm thinking is I spot the lone T-34 that's on the flank, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the 1-2 line, go all the way down and pick him off, instead of like just rushing headfirst into him. And the reason for that is I know there's a waffle over there somewhere. Chances are I might spot him, and he's spotted as one of our tanks crests and gets picked off. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go over here, use one of the bushes to camouflage my approach, and I'm gonna pick off T-34 relatively easily. Now as soon as that is done, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start heading back towards the other flank. I hug this rock so I don't get dirt by the M53-55. And the reason why I'm going to head back towards the other flank is, at this point, since where I was last spotted, the Waffle E100 will probably be thinking that I'm actually either coming for him or either sticking around to make sure I put a couple of shots into him. I can use that time to sort of like get back into position and sort of like help the Conqueror pick off like the few heavies that were going to come charging into him. Now at this point I again favor the ridge, sort of to get some elevation and sort of like shoot down on some of the tanks. And the reason for that is, if I spot some of the heavies coming, I can essentially put a shot, back off. The aim time of this tank and the reverse speed allows you to kind of like do that really fast and not take shots in the process. So I come over the ridge, I decide to peek out and see if I see some of the tanks coming, but unfortunately for me there's a lot of foliage in the way of my tank and I don't see anything essentially. Then I decide to move towards the Conqueror, just because I see there's an IS-4 standing right next to him, and at this point it becomes paramount that I help him out. Being 1 versus 4 or 5 tanks is going to be really difficult, because they essentially can just pen me at will, and I need to do it relatively more carefully. Over here I go to gold round for the IS-4, but I see an easy shot on the IS-8 and take it and take him out. The IS-4 basically gets taken out as well, and now we are left in a relatively favorable situation where there's 3 versus 3. But one of them being Waffle, you can never discount that one of your tanks can get taken out relatively easily. I spot the T-28 coming. I kind of assumed he was going to be there along with the Waffle. So I slowly started making my way towards that flank again in order to see if I can pick them off. I think the Conqueror spotted the T-28 as he was making his way through the open field, and at this point the poor T-28 unfortunately is caught between a rock and a hard place, and it's relatively easily that I pick him off as he tries to get into cover. Now one of the things that the 9.2 did was actually buff the Leopard's firing rate, so it fires relatively faster now than it used to. And so over here I see the Waffle E100 making his way to the corner. I think he was going after the RD because he kind of like knew where the RD was, or where generally the RD sits. He takes out the Conqueror. The RD tries unsuccessfully to sort of like take him out. I come around, use his low traverse speed to my advantage, and I put 2 shots into him and take him out. Now the enemy RD was following the Waffle E100, and he shoots me for most of my health. Now, judging from where the shot actually came from, I kind of like thought that he would be sitting anywhere between 1 and 6 line on the enemy side of the map, but I wasn't so sure where he was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again use the ridge to my advantage. I'm going to use the ridge to go all the way to the enemy's cap. And the reason why I did that is because if I get spotted by the RD during this process, I can always dive on the other side of the ridge and make it a very hard shot for the RD to make. if I go straight at the M53-55, chances are he might actually just derp me, and you know, I might get actually taken out. So this scenario would be a lot better, in which I could actually use the ridge to my advantage instead of just going head first into the RD, since it's only down to me and the RD. At first, over here, I'm gonna decide to sort of like engage the RD, hoping that he's not looking at me. But then again, I thought, you know, why give up map control when I clearly know where the RD is? So instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make him come to me, and so I turn around and go sit for the cap. Again, if you're actually trying to do that and it comes down to you versus somebody else, you should try to sit in some random spot on the map and not just the most obvious one. Generally, there's some cover within cap, and most people will tend to gravitate towards hiding behind it, hiding in front of it, or something like that. Again, the thing that you have to be sure know is RD will certainly most likely derp the most obvious locations first, and then if they still have reload time, and they'll just try to randomly derp in the cap, see where you are. So I know the RD is in this, will be in front of me if he's coming for me at some point. If he just derps me, you know, it's bad luck. You know, you cannot really do anything at that point. So I'm just gonna wait for him to come out and engage me, and at that point, you know, we'll see how the tables turn. I missed my shot, but you know, unfortunately for me, the RD tries to get one shot into me. I put one more into him. I think at this point he panicked, he fires over me, and that's all she wrote. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Noobs to Pros, and I'll see you in the next one.